And yeah, we're live. We're live and laughing at what happened in the green room right before we went live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 61. It's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. Here's where you find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to whatever Vince and Mike and Alex say. Go!
Episode 61, where we're approaching 100. Well, you know, I mean, getting in the right direction to 100, I suppose.
We're only, you know, what we do 52 a year, so a season, I mean. So
I think with all of the huge the budget that we're afforded by our dozens of sponsors, I think that for episode 100, we should most definitely do a proper live show where we're, I don't know, rent out some big fancy studio in Los Angeles somewhere and, you know, just do it properly.
Oh yeah.
We'll do like they did for the new Guitar Hero Live unveiling. We'll rent out some famous club and have all kinds of famous people come play guitar and talk. Famous heads that talk will show up. We'll get people like
Carl Johnson,
Walt Mossberg. What's that guy from? You know what I'm talking about? There's this guy. Is it
Michael Shapiro? I think it might be Michael Gordon Shapiro.
Is he jumping in? No, I'm trying to think of this. It's a man and a woman who interview people about tech, and I thought his name was like Walt Mossberg or something. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Walt Mossberg.
Never mind. It's not a good joke. The reason I bring it up is because I watched an episode last night of Silicon Valley. Have you guys been watching that show on HBO?
HBO, yep. No.
I watched an episode last year. I thought it was good. But
hilarious.
But just one episode. They do have a fantastic website, though.
I got it right. It's Walt Mossberg. Yeah, anyway, never mind the show. Hey, guys, how you doing? How's it going, Vince?
It's going okay. Happy Monday. Happy beginning of the work week for most people. Well,
we're sorry.
Sorry, Alex, but yeah.
Those people, not including Alex, who is a Tuesday kind of Monday person.
I'm in the future.
Yes, Japan has always been that country in the future. No wonder we can't catch up.
Yeah, that's the reason why New Zealand is just, you know, ahead of the game all the time. Or maybe some like Tonga or some Pacific island somewhere. So it's like right on the edge of the forefront of history right there. I'm actually, it's okay because right now, I don't know if you were aware, but the way that Japan justifies not giving its labor force any holidays from their jobs is they give the whole country week-long holidays throughout the year. So right now we're in the middle of one of those week-long holidays, and it's called Golden Week.
Mm.
And basically the entire country goes on holiday at the same time for a week, which means you can't do anything because everywhere is packed. The entire airport is clogged up. The highways are full. It's just ridiculous. It's okay though because at the rate that the Japanese population is dropping, which is something like 200,000 less babies every year or something, that's like one small town every year gets lost. It'll be fine. In 10 years, Japan's going to be great. Plenty of space. You know, you'll always be able to get a seat at the restaurant. Plenty of, you know, or maybe even 5 years at the rate that the country's population is falling. Anyway, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How's Mike?
Mike's doing great. Managed to reboot and actually connect, which is always a pleasure when it happens.
It's always a pleasure when we get to see your beautiful face. It's a true story.
You'll get your $20 later.
So, guys, let's dig in. We were talking about something from last week, and Vince said maybe we should just continue a little bit. And it was, we had, well, Vince, do you want to introduce that? Because you put it astutely.
Sure. Watson Wu is, great sound designer who's been working in the industry for a while and just gave us lots of cool techniques and ideas and concepts. What was that sound?
That was cool. Did you hear that?
Somebody's throwing plates in this place.
It was like a sort of a full wet spring reverb there.
Oh, man. I wish I had a microphone running there, but unfortunately.
Was that there at your place?
Yes, it was at my place.
Are you saying you use the area where all the programmers are as a reverb chamber? Is that what you're saying, Vince?
There's a couple of really interesting rooms in this place that actually have some decent sounds. But yeah, no dedicated reverb room yet. But anyways, yeah, Watson had some great stuff last week, and it certainly got me thinking about what my current setup is, and I thought it might be cool to actually go around and talk about what are the things that we have and whether we're going to augment things or reconsider things that we have in our kit or how we do things based on last week.
That is a great question. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that he talked about was the fact that he's got that little Tascam DR40, and yeah, he's got the $2,000 mics and the sound devices, preamps that are also thousands of dollars, and it is really legitimately amazing what you can do with something that is throwaway, something that is cheap, and you can do something really extreme with that. And for the most part, I've always had gear that is not super expensive, but also not super cheap. Okay, let's get this sort of mid-range gear, and I know it's going to be versatile, and I can do a whole lot of stuff with it. But what if I do get something that is, a cheap little recorder, a used recorder from Craigslist, a $50 field recorder, and you can get some of these really cheap Zooms brand new for under $100. And because they're so cheap, you can do really interesting stuff with those things. You're willing to put it in danger and perhaps get a more extreme or a more interesting sound than if you decided to do your more beloved gear to actually record a particular thing. So that's something that I was actually thinking about, and maybe I should actually think about getting recorders and mics that are worth thrashing a bit in order to get a really cool sound.
Where would you go? Craigslist, eBay? Where would you get that stuff?
Yeah, I was definitely looking a lot on Craigslist. There are a lot of guys that are turning over stuff. I mean, I do have the pleasure of living in LA, which means there are a lot of guys, a lot of recordists that have gear that they're trying to move around, especially the cheap gear, especially stuff that they want to upgrade from. And yeah, hey, this seems like an interesting shotgun mic for pretty cheap. This seems like a cheap a field recorder that'll be functional. So yeah, Craigslist has been looking like a pretty ripe place.
Nice. Last week Watson said that he uses a sound device. He's got like a 6-channel sound device. And the first thought in my head was, who wants to carry around 5 microphones and try to record surround sound? And that was an ignorant thought, because he's using it so he can tape a mic to the engine and then have another mic that's taped inside the car and something hanging off the sides of the car. Because my field recorder is just stereo, and I always felt like that was enough. But if I want to dig really deep into getting some sounds from like vehicles, you really do have to have all those channels if you want to capture everything, or a lot of gas so you can repeat the run again with a mic set in a different place. Would you go for like a 6-channel sound devices or $3,200?
Man, I could use that $3,200 right now.
We'll get sound devices as a sponsor, and they'll let us try. Each of us individually try a 6-channel. Never mind.
Yeah.
But I don't record any big things like that, Like I'll record wind or animals or footsteps or... What else do I got out there? Even gunshots you can do with it. I've done and used my stereo, but obviously with 6 channels I could probably do a lot better.
Yeah.
Have the mics in different places.
It is really cool, the different sounds you get from guns, and being able to actually record the space that way, especially the incoming aspect, the incoming perspective. That's something I've actually never recorded, but I would love to actually try that sometime.
Because I can't afford the 6-channel sound devices, I have to actually stand with the gun pointed at me when they fire and jump out of the way really quickly with my 2-channel stereo microphone.
Oh man.
I'm surprisingly light on my feet.
You're like that.
That's good.
You're like that YouTube archery guy, aren't you? You know, did you see that clip of the guy who's showing how he can fire the arrows from the outside of the bow, and he's like grabbing the arrows with his hand, and that's you, isn't
amazing. That guy's amazing. Mike, what are you using for your field recording?
Arguably, my field recorder is Kyle, since I don't do a lot of sound design, and I'm usually not going anywhere to mic anything. I'm usually showing up in the studio with musicians, and there's some person who's been paid to take all this work off my hands. So sadly, I don't have a whole lot to contribute to this discussion, though I am amazed that you actually found a human being with as cool a name as Watson Wu. I mean, I would kill for a name that distinctive. That is just like a living business card. That is Marvel Cinematic Universe quality name. So hats off to what an amazing sounding guest that must have been.
Oh, Watson's an awesome guy. And he's so forthcoming with his information. Like, he has no fear of letting you in on his tricks. He even has video, which I've watched before, and he reminded me of it at our show last week, where he recorded a Jaguar, and he showed you everywhere he placed the mic. Now, it was a really souped-up Jaguar. It's a really nice car, and he kept taking gaff tape and taping microphones to the paint job and all. Every time he would tape those things on, my brain would go, oh, my God, they're going to kill you if you peel that tape up and some paint comes with it. He has no fear, that Watson Wu. I love him to death. He's such a good friend and a great guy, and he was a fantastic guest.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Alex. What are you going to say about changing your remote rig?
Yeah, my field recording rig is actually it's new technology. It's like a full organic binaural 256-bit 4 billion gigahertz. They're called ears. They're really clever. You know, they adapt to the environment. They're good with like volume, dynamic range. The range is not so good, 20 hertz up to about 20K, but you get by. Yeah, they don't need any charging. Well, actually, you got to kind of charge them about 7 or 8 hours a day. That's my field recorder.
They quickly charge on coffee too.
Yeah, that's right. If you want like a quick burst, then there are ways. Binaural is the future of field recording.
This reminded me, Matt, who's always on the show. When I first met Matt, he had this cool pair of earbuds, and they were actually microphones. And he would go to places where you weren't allowed to record, and he would just wear his earbuds. And in his pocket would be some kind of recorder, and he would just... But it was funny because when you would talk to him, he would talk to you like this. Like if he was recording this way and you say, hey, Matt, how you doing? He'd go, good, I'm doing good. He couldn't turn from the source. And so, it was kind of fun to pick on him a little bit, like, hey, Matt, look over here at this hot dog stand. And he would, Kyle, you're ruining my spatial recording. That's not a complete truth. I actually only did that to him in a test when he was showing me how it works. I never went with him to a big place. But he used to go to places where you weren't supposed to record and just go, here you go. I got a recording of it now. And I thought those were really cool, so I'm going to look those up if you guys will fill the air while I find those headphone microphones.
Yeah, he didn't really talk a lot about some of the other things that people do for field recordings. Like, I don't know, when I was in school, I would mess around with things like Jekyllin discs and, head models with microphones where the ears are and stuff like that. But I've never actually done that ever since leaving school. But hey, there's all sorts of ways to get a sound out there, right?
Yeah, actually, I only have one recorder. Actually, I have a Sony M10, the tiny little M10. It is pretty decent. I mean, I'm doing an entire for the project that I'm doing in Kyoto at the moment. That's got all of the pretty much all of the voiceover samples are recorded on that. So it's a pretty decent little unit, but really, yeah. Watson Wu, it's a good name.
Yes. I can't find these. I'll have to put them in later. I remember what they look like, but every time I type earbuds, it just shows me a bunch of earbuds. because they expect them speakers, not microphones.
Shall we move on to this second topic that we have, which I'm really excited to get Vince's view about?
Can I add one more thing to the field recording?
Okay.
I was just telling the guys about this Teufelsberg NSA listening tower, which was a American base, if you will, like a spy base that was in Berlin, and they would listen to all of Berlin from this tower. But during the time that it was a secret, nobody knew what was going on up there. So it's been declassified, and there are people who go up there and hold concerts and do stuff. And I may have talked about this in the past. For some reason, I feel like I have. But I just revisited the impulse responses. You can go to this link I'm going to send you. I'll put it in the show notes, and also I'm putting it in the chat right now. And you can download the impulse responses from all over the different buildings, and they're really fantastic. There's a lot of crazy, like really long slapback delays and crazy reverbs that have tonal qualities to them that wash over you that are way above typical impulse responses. And so I was using those on a project just a couple days ago. I was going to say yesterday, but I think it was yesterday and the day before. Maybe it's 2 or 3 days ago. And it reminded me of them, and I thought, I got to make sure that I share this with everybody. Hey, and Matt M. in the chat room said ambisonic microphones are cool, and I think that is exactly what they were called, those stereo earbud microphones. So yeah, so check out the Toast. Yeah, they're free IRs I compose, and they're super high quality. You can use them all over the place. I used the crap out of them, and they were fantastic. So I wanted to share that because it has to do with sound design, and it's really cool to have impulse responses. And it leads me to one more thing, Alex. Hold on. Hold on. So I created a smart folder because I've got impulse responses all over my computer depending upon the software I've installed, whether it's going to be Sound Designer that's in Logic, or whether it's going to be the impulse responses from QL Spaces by Quantum Leap, or whatever they call themselves now, East West. I got stuff all over, so I thought, I should just collect all of these impulse responses into one smart folder. Why can't they just give them all the same name, WAV? Why do they have to be EIRDs for one and SLRPs for another? It just is so crazy. Doesn't it drive you guys crazy when you're trying to just group these things together?
Everyone has their own standard,
And in the end, they're just WAV files. They're just some sort of audio file.
Well, this is a perfect segue. Let's see. We've talked about Berlin. We've talked about high quality, and now we're talking about format. So that is just like a beautiful, beautiful segue. I'm going to just, you've opened the door for me there, Carl. I'm going to walk right in. So everybody, if the astute listeners and viewers out there who are monitoring Native Instruments website all the time may have noticed that since Music Mess in Frankfurt a few weeks ago, last week I think, they have a big new banner up on the top of their page, which is touting their new stems format. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the website here for people who are listening, just to explain what it is. It says stems, a new DJ era. It says a stem file is an open multi-channel audio file that contains a track split into 4 musical elements, for example, bass, drums, vocals, melody. And each element is available independently within the one file, and you can mix that in ways that just weren't possible until now. Basically, it says here that it's an open format designed to benefit the entire music industry. So that's us guys. And DJs and producers can create their own stems with the free Stem Creator tool, and hardware and software developers can access the code and specifications to integrate stems into future music production and performance tools.
The new Stem Creator tool, do they mean a DAW?
I think, though, by Stem, there's an asterisk there. If I just read down the bottom what the asterisk says, it's probably this free Stem Creator. Oh no, that's just when it's going to be released. I think it's probably just it's just a desktop tool that you use to. It'll probably just take 4 separate like sums, stereo sums, and then just mash them into the one file format. And I'm not sure what it means. It says as a premium file format. I don't really know what it means by a premium file format. But
so why don't we start at the top about what a stem is, because they broke the definition.
Yeah, I did. Okay, so back at the top. A stem is an open multi-channel audio file that contains a track split into 4 musical elements. So basically, it's one audio file that contains 4 stereo sums, which obviously it's intended for DJs because up until now, DJs, when they're wanting to sort of cut the bass drum out of a track so that they can bring up, the kick from another track, they're needing to use EQ. But the point here is that with this new stem file format, they can just mute that one part of this single file, which will be the kick drum, and they can get a clean sort of mix that way instead of having to resort to EQ. So this is their intention for what the stem's for. But the reason that I mention it today is because they do say it's for the entire music industry, which includes us, and I'm wondering whether you guys have any ideas or opinions about whether there could be some interesting applications for this file format for game audio.
I have to go somewhere. My mom said if you can't still say anything at all, so I'm muting my microphone.
Let's see, the game industry, huh? Let's see, open multi-channel audio file. I don't know. Right now on the game that I'm working on, we've been messing around with multi-channel interleaved files that have like 32 channels in them, and constantly doing stuff with multi-channel audio for both music and sound, mostly for interactive music and sound. So I guess it makes sense that they'd want it for DJs, and DJs are indeed very interactive music performers. But I really wish it would tell me more about this. As far as I can tell, it seems to just be another attempt to make a type of sound library that's focused on DJs, and so stuff would be delivered in the stem format as opposed to dealing with aggregating waves together or splitting up waves with other software that is able to actually parse out individual instruments out of it. So maybe that's it. We're going to see stem libraries that are really targeted at DJs as opposed to more generic contact libraries. That's what I'm thinking right now.
I don't think it's. I'm not sure that it stretches over into the area of like contact and things like that. I think it's more just for basically. So they have a whole bunch of online music retailers who are on board with this project that they're on at the moment, including Juno Download Beatport, etc., etc. So basically, I think the idea is that for DJs who are into more creative remixing, instead of buying wave files of the songs that they're going to play out live, they can buy these stem files and then get access to just the kick by itself or just the bass by itself, which can give them more options for easier remixing on the fly instead of having to fiddle around with EQ.
So basically, it's a compression file, right? It's got a bunch of stuff in there, and you get to choose which you want to mess with. Is that what they're calling it?
I guess so, and I suppose there is a way that you can just play the whole thing as just one, just one two-bus sum,
right?
If you want.
But that's the point. That's the point of a stem. Is like you record a drummer, and he's got 8-10 mics up. But you do a mix, you do a drum mix, and you break that down to a stereo stem, and you send that to somebody who's going to work on the file because they don't need all of those 8. That's a stem.
The fact that they call them stems, yes.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy. And so when they receive a stem in a pro audio sense, and I'm not suggesting that game audio isn't pro audio, but some nomenclature has named albums and music non-related to game audio is pro audio, and then game audio. So it's a what do you call that, a retronym? So so in the pro audio field, you get a stem. You don't want to go see the snare by itself, or you would have asked for all the tracks. You just want a stereo mix of the drums. But what they're doing here with Native Instruments, if I understand, is they're saying here's a stem, but you can get to all the separated files inside, or you can just listen to it as a stereo thing, which to me is just a 6-channel wave file, or some sort of zip file that their machine is unloading and then giving you a stereo pair to listen to if you wanted to. I can't tell what they mean by stem, so that's why I kind of get confused on this whole thing. What it's offering, really.
The name is really, really unfortunate, isn't it? Because the target audience that they're dealing with, DJs and producers, have a very different idea of what the word stem means.
Yeah.
That the word stem has a definite meaning in which DJs and producers understand and use every day when they're talking about actual production remixes and stuff like that. to actually, I guess if they call it stems, plural, I suppose it sort of makes sense that you are getting a collection of stems, in a sense. But what I want to know is what's going to happen to the whole process of mastering music? Because, you know, the whole process of mastering music means that you're listening to the whole collection of stems together, and you're treating the whole music as one single sort of entity, and then adjusting things, especially with you know, your I don't know, like tape saturations or compression or limiting to bring it up to industry levels and stuff like that. How is this new stems format going to deal with the mastering, or is it just going to be forgot? Is that going to be shifted aside? And basically, the idea is that sorry, Matt M just said should be stems, not stems. That's how Sean Connery would say it. Yes.
Well, like Native Instruments,
Sean Connery, DJ,
had a tradition of misspelling something in a useful way to make it differentiable from everything else that uses that word. So it's actually handy that contact is spelled with a K, in addition to kind of giving the German origins of the product. You know, we know that we're referring to something specific rather than a generic idea. And here, if they'd spelled it with a Z or something, or you know, the German spelling with a SCH, that would have been very handy. But I share everybody's umbrage in taking a very generic concept and trying to make that a brand, not even like a concept within your little private architecture, but presumably a brand you're trying to offer the world. It's a little arrogant.
And it's confusing in the world of audio. You know, if I'm sending a DJ some stuff and he's not necessarily familiar with Native Instruments, and I say, I want to send you some stems for your iMachine, it's going to be like, well, all right. You know, I'd rather have individual files. I want the hi-hat by itself so I can affect it, you know, and mess with it. No, it's in there. The hi-hat's in the stem, and then you know that guy's going to go, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what a stem is.
So, the naming aside,
we can't let it go. It's so.
We haven't gotten past the name yet. The naming aside, is there any? I wonder if there's any interesting applications that we can think of that how this might benefit game audio people, because it is an open file format, meaning that it will be accessible to all of us.
Nope. Move on.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
What I find, the question I have is the description, the blurb implies that the 4-channel limitation is kind of hardwired into the spec so that you can never have more than 4 channels. And
right.
If so, I can imagine the motivation is maybe it's really targeted at DJs, and then Native Instruments wants to sell some hardware with a certain set number of faders or something like that. You know, they want to sell some concomitant hardware. Then I get it. You want 4 channels, nice and simple, predictable. But I don't know if that limit really behooves the rest of the world, where we're not doing stuff in real time and we don't mind a little complexity, and indeed we need a little complexity. So they may have targeted a very narrow niche, and maybe it's not as for the rest of us as the marketing copy would imply.
It might be useful in a rhythm game kind of sense, because for Guitar Hero we would mix down to stems in a more traditional sense, and in the way they're doing it is this packages all of these stems together. Imagine you're playing Guitar Hero and you're playing guitar, and you've got a singer here, and you got a drummer over there, and you got a bass player. All those were separate stems, and then we had a song stem for the things that you would never make a mistake on, like all the backing tracks. But the reason we separate all those stems is because when you're playing guitar, if you make a mistake, the stem drops out, and a sound starts happening, showing that you're doing something wrong. And when you caught back on and started getting it right, the stem would fade in and continue playing through the song. So we'd have to take these whole songs and break them into the playable stems that were going to be used per instrument for the bundle. And so in that case, if this is a lightweight kind of way of storing the same kind of audio files on a game, then perhaps rhythm games, mobile rhythm games or something, could use this format to do the same thing. You know, if you've got like some sort of tapping rhythm game, which millions of them exist, but again, this is a caveat that this has to be some sort of lightweight compression algorithm that's going going to be easier on your phone and still get all those big audio files in there, then yeah, it would be useful like that, because you could send one zip file or one stem file according to Native Instruments, attach it to the song. It opens up through the through some sort of programming that happens in your game and attaches itself to the certain alleyways that you're going to be touching for music, and when you miss one, it drops out that stem. So as a way of getting those sounds packaged and put on a phone, if it's lightweight, I could see it to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, for that kind of thing, I guess if they're going to be offering sort of like in-app purchases of extra music tracks for some game that requires the parts to be separate, then yeah, that'd be super useful, I suppose, just to offer it as this stem file format, and then there you go. It's one file that contains your 4 tracks that you need for whatever. But still, yeah, I just wonder about mastering, limiting.
Well, if they're just packaging them up and then you're going to get audio files in the end, you're still in charge of messing with the post stuff. But if are they being forced to do this to stay in concert with the DJ world? Is this something that's happening? Maybe Beatport has started to incorporate this stems technology to the DJs, and therefore Native Instruments wants those DJs to use their products, so they're incorporating the stem into them. Or are they creating stem and trying to push it out to the world of DJs and say, hey guys, we've got a new standard and you should use it?
I mean, this is sort of branching out a little bit too far away from game audio, but I suspect that they may have sort of probed a bunch of top-running DJs and said, okay, what problems do you have that we can solve? You know, what is the thing? What is the main thing in DJ performance that you are finding that it's a blockage to your ability to give more dynamic remixes for people on the fly? And DJs probably said, well, probably the main thing is that a song is one chunk of music, and that I have limited control over what I can do with that if I want to basically, yeah, remix it on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably why their product design department thought, well, in that case, you know, what about a file format that gives you that granular control over a piece of music so that you can take parts of a piece of music and put them together instead of just having to deal with one and sort of using all these sort of EQ hacks and stuff to actually isolate certain parts of it. So I suspect that's probably the origin of this idea.
I guess we just have to wait and see. In my opinion, we have to wait and see how big these stem files are going to be.
I wonder about when they show this format. I'm just trying to think about something that could be cool in it, and something that's coming to mind is if you can have like some sort of cool metadata in there that can decorrelate and recorrelate, let's say, transient data within the 4 tracks, and you can actually offset each of the 4 stems meaningfully from each other in an interesting way, and the metadata that is built into the stem file actually facilitates that. Maybe something like that could be cool.
They're definitely talking about doing instant track edits. So it seems like they're letting you individually get in there and mess with like things like transients, I'm presuming.
Yeah, yeah, something.
They're smart. They're smarter than me. They're doing something here that's brilliant. I just don't see it yet. That's what I think.
Yeah, once they tell us about this open format, that'll be great.
It's the whole idea of, again, this is a really interesting topic, but it's nothing to do with game audio, but the whole idea of DJ technology is very interesting, really, because, you know, there's a lot of controversy when all of these companies started releasing these, software like Tractor and what's the other big one for DJs? Tractor and not Sonato, something Toes. Somebody to remind me in the chat room, I think. Anyway, no. Anyway, they're having this kind of DJ software that automatically sync tracks for you, so that you can tell it, you know, the BPM. You just press sync, and it'll fit it together with your other track of music that's playing automatically. So again, that sort of raises then the whole question: what is a DJ? What do they actually do? If there's no more skill required to beat match, tempo match. What do you call it? Yeah, beat match, I think is what you call it.
A bunch of different things depending on your DAW.
Serato, thank you. AKA AKA also known as the door expert, has reminded me it's called Serato. Anyway, yeah, and the whole idea of DJ technology is very interesting and sort of a bit controversial. Is a DJ really a musician? If they're just pressing a sync button to put together two tracks that sound nice together, what's the significance there? And now if they're able to get your kick out from your track and use that underneath a different song that they've automatically beat matched to and muted the stem of the other track's kick, then it's all very interesting. Not related to game audio. But
it could be. What if these things were actually doing it in a gameplay meaningful way? People have been talking about this for a while, not specifically DJ music, but the general video game music. Hey, it's like the composer and the conductor are in the game console creating the soundtrack for your gameplay experience. Hey, maybe if this is actually a very small step towards that, I would actually say inevitable future. I don't know how far away it is, but I think it is an inevitable future that we're going to have video games with soundtracks that have extremely limited or maybe even no human involvement.
That's actually pretty interesting. Could you elaborate on that a bit more? Because that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of really interesting studies. Before I went to school to do music composition at USC, I was actually looking at some other schools, and one of the schools that I was interested was this one, UC Santa Cruz. And they had this one professor there, David Cope. And for years, instead of really writing his music in the traditional way, he calls himself, he had been a long time classical concert art music composer. But for decades now, he's been working with this program that he wrote that actually writes a lot of his music for him by basically analyzing all the music that he has written before and basically saying, oh, this is the natural thing that would come up now. This is what you would write, right? He originally started writing this program as a way to sort of get him around blocks in his composition process. And he actually just kept on banging away at it, and it's a full-on music composition tool that analyzes previous music for style and writes original music in that style. I mean, what if you had something like this, and it was running in a video game, and, oh, hey, we don't have the composer for the last game died. Let's say something like that. This actually happened with, what's that game? Oh, Heavy Rain. The Heavy Rain composer actually died while they were working on the game with Ellen Page and what's his name? And so they had to have another composer in. But what if instead you actually had a composer that looked back at the old work from the previous game and just wrote all this music? And then we have all this other technology coming from the DJ world and use that to apply various algorithms and heuristics as to how do you implement this music? When do I actually hit this cue? And it's less music composition because you've got all these algorithms at work creating music content, and instead more game design decisions. And
have we seen any? That's really fascinating. But have we seen any parallels in any other facet of game development that could sort of be a model for the way that game audio might go if it goes down that track? Because I mean, you could also argue that with the advent of 3D rendering, when 3D rendering first came around, people thought, oh well, if I can just sort of create this 3D model and then render it photorealistically, nobody's going to do any more matte painting anymore. It's all just going to be 3D rendered. Whereas map painting, of course, that's referring to the movie industry, but nobody's going to ever do any like hand-drawn art anymore because we can just render it all in 3D and get photorealism just like that. Oh, it's so easy. It's not that easy, of course, but people may have thought that 3D rendering could have walked all over hand illustration, and yet, of course, we're seeing that hand illustration has found its own special niche that 3D rendering sometimes tries to even emulate now, but can't really do. So can you think of any parallels in other areas of game development that sort of mirror the way that this might turn out if it becomes so algorithmic like that?
Well, there is. Actually, recently, there's been a big spike in the popularity of a certain genre of game called the roguelike. And roguelikes, of course, require lots of design and lots of balance of systems, but there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in the game that is not really being properly anticipated by any of the designers there. They don't know what a level is going to look like until they happen to load it up, and that's pretty interesting. We already have things like the Unity Game Asset Store. And they are selling not just things like tile sets for 2D games and models and rigs. They're also selling things like algorithms. Hey, here's an algorithm for generating your 2D platforming level. Okay, cool. What if those guys got better? And in order to actually make a game, all you were doing was just saying, I'll have a little bit of this level generator, a little bit of this AI generator, a little bit of this weapons markup language, and eventually you mash it all together, and then you have a full-on game that's there, and you didn't really have a part in designing those.
That's I think it's a really interesting idea, but somehow I get the feeling that by the time that we arrive at the point where it is that automated, that sort of, yes, anybody can make a game now by just pressing the, make game button, make game audio, make game level, make game graphics, compile, test, release. By the time we get to it being that automated, I think that probably the market, the consumers, will have also come to realize that, yes, it is that easy. Oh, that's just another game created by Instant Game Machine. Maybe there will be people who enjoy that kind of thing, but I think probably what might be more likely is just that the consumers become very savvy of that process, and then therefore the importance of handcrafted artwork in games and handcrafted audio will also see a resurgence, well, not a resurgence, but that'll also be important as well once you get to that point of such automation, or maybe not.
Well, I like to think so, because I care about the stuff that I work on, whether it be, music composition or sound design or game design in general.
There is a cultural thing as well, I think, because it depends on whether, as the consumer, whether they prefer innovation or whether they prefer just sort of really highly refined examples of a certain thing. Because you can sort of see that at the moment with Japanese pop music. Japanese pop music, in case you didn't know, is extremely formulaic, and it's so predictable. Basically, you're just changing out the face, but sort of the face is kind of the same too. But you're sort of changing out the face and the dance moves. But basically, it's so formulaic that it could be algorithmic. The chord changes are kind of the same. The instrumentation, you've got it's sort of that style drums, that style guitar. Then there's the obligatory rap bit in the middle where some dude will come and rap in Japanese a little bit with bits of English thrown in. And then the girl will start singing again in the squeaky nasal voice. And it's so formulaic. And yet, for the consumer point of view, that's fine. They like that and they continue buying it. That's just simply because the Japanese consumer of J-pop music, they're not really after innovation and something different and new. They're just wanting the sort of reliable style of entertainment. But somehow I get the feeling that just looking at the tendency of game consumers in the last 40 or 50, 30 or 40 years, somehow I don't think it's going to go that way.
So
I'm going to try a red cup.
No, you go, Mike, please.
I was going to try to combine all these tangents and lasso them back home to the subject of our show and ask, does anyone know if there are any roguelike games with interesting audio? Roguelike games, of course, being very generative by nature, most of them seem to be silent. Has anyone tried to put interesting audio that reflects these procedurally generated levels and the usual carnage of monsters that just pile in from every side?
There's like a generative audio component to it, and FTL is sort of roguelike there. But I do rather like the audio for FTL. Let's see, a more traditional roguelike. Thinking about it.
There's only, in my opinion, there is only one modern roguelike. It's a fantastic game that you all must play called Brogue.
Right.
Wait a minute, Brogue?
Brogue. Brogue is fantastic. It's Brogue is a very traditional roguelike, but it's just really, really well done. It's sort of
cool.
Yeah, it's really the text graphics are fantastic in Brogue. I don't think Brogue has any sounds. It's very orthodox.
Well, thanks for taking a dump on my question there, Alex.
Sorry, you're welcome.
It was a real anticlimax.
It's Brogue, man. It's Brogue.
We're good at that anticlimax stuff. We practice.
Roguelikes could be an interesting area to experiment with procedural sound and maybe try some interesting adaptive music, because you've got endless variation with a few simple elements. And I don't know if anyone's tried to do music for a roguelike, for example, and that would really lend itself to some kind of reactive score where you're asking, are there 30,000 orcs surrounding you or 50,000? You know, exactly how horrible is the situation? And given that the game is so persistent and gameplay tends to be so long, it might be an interesting platform for exploring a new approach to both sound and music.
That is fantastic. Because roguelikes are actually the genre in which the idea of the bot sort of originated. Because they're all text, they're extremely easy to parse, so you can create software and stuff that will automatically play these games in different ways. That'd be, wow, I'm just thinking, that is a great advanced music assignment for someone who's interested in video game music. Here is a basic parser that you would use in order to play a roguelike. Let's say good old NetHack or something. And and knowing all this, like you could figure out how many of these characters are on here, and you can feed that into RTPCs in Wise, and let's have some music that will play alongside a dude's session of NetHack. That's great. I actually kind of want to do that now.
It could be really cool. There are situations within roguelikes that could lend themselves to interesting accents by music. Obviously, you don't want combat music all the time because rogues tend to be combat all the time. But there are sometimes like you'll fall into a teleportation trap at a roguelike, and you've been kind of hanging out on level 10. All of a sudden, you're down on level 26, and you're way out of your league. Mm-hmm. That's actually a really scary moment, and you often frantically try to find your way back up to a level where you think you could survive. So that would be a really interesting occasion for some tense music, because you're thinking, I'm not prepared for this level. Yeah. Or the first time you see a monster whose rating is n greater than your own character level, that might be a nice way to let you know that something really dangerous is coming. And anyone who's played roguelikes know that you sometimes are looking at like an ASCII soup, and you can kind of just start slamming the keys, and all of a sudden you didn't realize that capital D means you're not really paying attention. But the music could tell you, hey, wake up, there's like Balrog's uncle is coming down on you with wrath. So there are a lot of interesting ways that this genre could really make use of music and sound design.
Yeah, I love that.
Also, dealing with repetition would be an interesting challenge as well, because often with roguelikes, gameplay can be extremely short, especially when you're first starting, you don't know what you're doing. And the whole idea of permadeath being that you're starting at the start of the game every time, unless obviously once you die, you start back at the start again, making sure that the music is suitably repetitive but not annoying, so that when you're always seeing those first level 1, level 2, level 3, that's kind of the, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I play traditional rogues, it's sort of, when you do really well, it's really tense. You've got that nervous feeling that, oh, if I die, I'm going to have to start all over again. You've come that far, and then all of a sudden you've got to, go all the way back to level 1 again and be this sort of, weakling with a slingshot.
Oh,
Carla's just got some magnificent looking flowchart up here on the screen. You should read this out for our listeners.
What?
You should read it out for our listeners.
Yeah, I'm going to. So I was searching while you guys were talking. So real quick backstory. So when Guitar Hero came to an end, I decided to start my own company designing an engine that would generatively create audio for video games, and we've been patented, so I'm pretty stoked about it. So I feel like I could share some flowcharts of at least the way that we tried to solve that here. And since we only have 10 minutes left, it makes it great, so I have to talk quickly, and if you miss the details, too bad. But anyway, so there's a game. There are 3 components. There's basically a generative engine. That's kind of the nucleus of the cell, right? And it has to receive a bunch of information. And the way we built ours is the game engine is going to send music triggers and sound effects triggers to this generative engine to say, hey, a trigger has happened, you got to do something. The audio designer creates all these templates, and the templates are just metadata for music, like what key should the music be in, what's the pace it should be in, how loud is it going to play, just generic kind of metadata. And so when the game engine sends the music trigger over to the generative engine knows what template to go get and starts playing music based on that template. And we also incorporated the composer because I think it's foolish that we should build music that doesn't involve a composer. Even though a machine can create music, it can't create great music. And the only way you're going to get like the Emperor's theme is if you hire a composer who's going to write that kind of stuff, right? So this first thing you're looking at is just like the outer look of what stuff is going to be sent to the generative engine. That'll make sense now when I show you this other one. Hold on, I got another thing here. I got to find it. There it is. Now this is what's happening inside the generative engine. Do you guys see this?
Okay.
I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
It's coming.
So this is the way we're handling it. So again, over here on the gray area on the left is the game music trigger that's come in, or the game sound effects trigger that's come in. And it gets sent to this trigger to OSC translator. And all that's doing is converting everything into an OSC language so that you could use your wireless controller. Say you got a friend who's playing he's playing Call of Duty, and you're watching him play, and he's sniping, and you want to help him out. You can grab the other controller, and actually through our game engine, you can actually start sending graphics onto the screen, like making his right side of his screen start to flash red because you see somebody sneaking up on him on the right side. And so he's not even paying attention to you, but he can see stuff. So by using OSC, we're just kind of future-proofing it because we think that the world's kind of going to go that way. And you can do non-audio things through an audio engine with OSC. Anyway, so what happens is the trigger knows what template it wants to see. It wants the generative engine to call. And so the template dispatcher goes out and gets it and sends it up to the generative engine. Then the generative engine reads that template and does the things that are different than the template it already has. It doesn't like refresh a whole new template. So if you send it the same template twice, it wouldn't do anything because it's already got that stuff in its brain. But inside that template is all this metadata, right? And some of that metadata is, hey, go get this snippet by the composer. And so it'll go out to the storage unit and grab the snippet it's been instructed to go get. It'll say, hey, we're going to play, excuse me, this template says that we're going to play some sort of military orchestral theme, and it requires us to have the snare drums from this sample library and the so-and-such from another sample library. And it goes out to the sample dispatcher and collects all that stuff. Same thing for any sound effects it's going to play for when a sound effects trigger comes through. And then if it needs to add any DSP stuff, which isn't a good example for music, because you don't want to add a bunch of reverb onto music that's already been recorded with a bunch of reverb. But it helps for sound effects. You know, you walk into a room is going to be a different reverb than if you're outside and it goes off. Anyway, so the trigger comes from the game. It calls a template. The template has the metadata. It goes to the generative engine. The generative engine reads that metadata, goes out and grabs all its components, and then starts playing and sends the audio out to your game engine. And what's cool about that is, like, if you're in room A and the template is called room A and it's generating all this music for room A, when you walk to the edge of room A, there's another template, another game trigger goes off, and it calls a template called hallway B. Even though you're not in the hallway, it loads that information, and the generative engine knows that as soon as you cross that threshold, it needs to start playing hallway B music. And a good designer, because again, if you go back to that first spreadsheet, I said, you need audio designers to create these templates. A good designer is going to create a room and a hall template that sound very similar. It's not going to be like the room A is classical and hallway B is jazz, and it's just going to immediately change and do all kinds of stark transitions. It's going to be based in the key you're already playing. It's going to be at the same pace you're probably already at. And then what else happens is game triggers come in for, like, if you're being attacked by a monster in that room. You go into the room and it's neutral, but all of a sudden somebody jumps off the ceiling and attacks you. The game trigger sends that information directly over to another template. That template gets called into the generative engine. And remember what I said, it only plays things that have changed. So the room template in a neutral state is 7/8 the same as a room template in the attack state. The only thing that's changed is a rhythm sped up or some new samples have been introduced that it's going to have to play. And it starts doing that immediately, even though it's being sent templates as a wholesale kind of text document. It's only paying attention to the details that changed. And so that's basically what we're doing, is you get the game trigger or the sound effects trigger, it comes in, it calls a template, it goes to the generative engine. The generative engine reads that template, goes out and gets what it needs, starts generating the sound it needs, and then does it through the out to the audio, out to your speakers. I just wanted to share that because we're talking generative audio, which is something really close to my heart, and I think we found a pretty decent solution. Like, we could use that for roguelikes. You could just pop in these metadata kind of instructions into some generative engine that's sitting in the game, and it just starts generating sound.
Carl, would you ever be persuaded to show us some of the demos I think you've put together in the past, and like give us a on-ear demo of some of your engine in action? Are you at liberty to do that?
I am, and I was so quiet because I was trying to download stuff from Dropbox because it's not on my machine, because all of my stuff that's local is on my Drobo, and my Drobo blew up because its power supply doesn't work, which made me go out and buy a new power supply that doesn't work.
It's been a good week at Studio Johnson.
I wanted to talk about those really quickly. Did you guys know when you buy a power supply, obviously you got to pay attention to the voltage, right? You got to pay attention to the polarity, whether it's positive, center, whatever. But most of the times people ignore the amperage. The Drobo runs on a 12-volt, center positive, 10-amp power supply. 10 amps.
10 amp. That's...
10 amps. So I went over to Fry's and I said, I need all this stuff. And of course the brilliant people that work at Fry's said, you don't really need to worry about the amperage. I said, I kind of want to make sure I hit 10 amps. So they gave me a 6.5 amps. No, sorry, 6 amps. Can you see it? 6 amps, 600 milliamps.
Oh, that's not, no way.
So I plugged it in, and it's got this cool feature where the plugs, there's a bunch of different plugs, and they all have these prongs, and you can just reverse it if you want to change the polarity. So you don't have to worry about center positive or negative. You can just flip this thing and plug it back into the holes. So I plugged it in, and you know what my Drobo does on 6 amps? That is 12 volts, center positive, 6 amps. It goes start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And my Mac goes, what the F are you doing? And then locks up.
Well,
or was it great to end an episode on a high note?
I wanted to share the importance of getting the amperage right for any kind of stuff that you're working with. And when you're working with laptops and cell phones, the amperage is so small. I mean, an iPad is 2 amps. An iPhone is 1.5, I think. So the Drobo wanting 10 is ridiculous. But if people don't know, a Drobo is a RAID enclosure of 5 hard drives. I use it for RAID, and I also use it for storage as one of my backup sources. And so that's why I wasn't able to, Mike, answer you the question of can we check out some sounds, because those files are taking forever to download from Dropbox while I'm doing a show.
Well, perhaps for a future episode.
Yeah. Save me, guys. I'm complaining endlessly.
Oh, man.
It's
kind of weird.
Thanks, buddy. Smooches. Anyway, I was able to get these spreadsheets. Let's talk about that at a future episode, because I've kept quiet about it while we waited to get our patent, but now we're as safe as a patent technically makes you. And so I think it'd be really fun to go over all the different ways that we could envision making a generative engine, and then signing something over to me that says I get to use any of them if they're better than the ideas we came up with. And then, oh wait, that didn't sound right, did it? No, I think it would be fun to talk about that. I would never, ever steal from anybody. That is a horrible thing to do to your friends. But I think it's very interesting, all the different ways that generative music could be generated. I think it's great. And for those who want to really check it out, because I'm deep into it and I'm just spewing at the mouth, go to Teufelsberg.com and download Nautical, which is the one we use for our demos until we built our engine. It's a fantastic piece of software. It's made by the guys who made Cohen, which is what Brian Eno used for all of his generative records, music for elevators and all kinds of fantastic stuff. I think it costs $100, but if you feel like having something that's amazingly useful, I get it. I generate most of the stuff that I write. I'll generate like 30 minutes worth of music, find the areas that I think sound really strong, take those out, and then it's building off of that. It kind of kickstarts my creativity and then gives me some kind of basis for something that's happening, I think. So check out Nautical. Because it's quiet.
I did just remember Spore had some interesting generative music for certain sections. Not all of it was generative, but quite a bit of it was.
Yes, and the DS version as well.
Yeah.
Well, guys, should we call it a night so I don't end up accidentally complaining some more?
It's been a pretty fantastic episode. I was going to say awesome, but I think the whole entire game audio industry needs to be. We have enough people saying the word awesome. It's time to move on from the word awesome, I think. So it was a fantastic episode. Excellent.
Fantastic.
Marvelous.
Full stuff.
Superb.
Excellent.
Say again.
And high latency, as always.
Yeah. That's why it took so long for Mike to say that. It's funny, we waited forever for Mike to go, and high latency. It's like a double meaning. All right, guys. Well, hey, it was great talking to you. Everybody, hey, man, we have had a rash of likes on Facebook and subscriptions on Twitter. Mostly our Twitter account's really blowing up more than anything else. Thank you, everybody. So please continue and recommend us to your friends. Anybody who likes Scotch and Pop-Tarts, we're the show. Like us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and we will be very appreciative. Thanks, chatties, for being in the room, as usual, which was a full room. Thank you so much. And thanks, guys, for being here. I'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.